Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler, and I hope everybody had a good weekend. And the topic for today is going to be Canadian unity and my increasing pessimism about it ever happening again. I'm very much of the opinion that it's not going to happen. Uh, for very similar reasons of what's going on in, say, the United States with the fracturing there, but I think Canada is a little bit, say, more unique because a lot of the fracturing is done not just along political lines and the political divide. There's also very much unique subcultures in Canada that are gearing up for complete separation. And I'm not just talking about the Albertans. Quebec looks like it's going to do so as well. And really, who here in Canada is even attempting to create a Canadian national identity that more than one of the subgroups can rally behind? Because, I mean, the elbows up crowd sure as shit ain't doing it. They are those who wish to subjugate anybody who disagrees with them. That's not a call for unity. The right has, many different, say, factions in Canada, or we can say subgroups, and neither one of them is willing to overlook, say, the issues that they have with each other at this time and create an actual form of a unity movement, even on the right. I shouldn't say that entirely. There are, I have noticed groups that are attempting it. I'm not at the stage where I would say they are effective. They're still relatively small, and there's whether or not they can do any type of unification remains to be seen. Um, and I think a massive problem is, like, for the last, say, 50 years, what is the Canadian identity? It's mostly been, we're not American is kind of the rallying cry. Now, obviously, you have in certain provinces, you have definitive cultural and ethnic identities, but it doesn't go beyond that localized group. Um, you can think of, say, like parts of, say, southern Ontario, okay, where there's, the ruralness and the very much the farming culture of Canada. You could connect that cultural identity with, say, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and, say, the ranchers over in Alberta very easily. I haven't really seen that being done, and that doesn't scale to the rest of Canada. I mean, you've got really Quebec with the Quebecers and, the Bloc creating their own national, or not national, but their own identity for themselves that does not really include a Canadian identity. You have, the ever growing number of tribes that are being recognized or pseudo recognized across Canada. They somewhat sometimes come together, but again, there's massive divides in the tribal division. Uh, Ottawa, Toronto, they're their own unique subculture that is never going to scale. Same thing with parts of BC. Like, there is a very much a coastal liberal elite identity, that's not going to scale. There's also, Western, say, pseudo conservatism, cultural identity. That's not going to scale. I don't see anybody looking at all these individual subgroups, the ones I've mentioned, the ones I haven't, and the ones I don't know about, and going, okay, what is the common thread of being Canadian? Now, there are, again, certain groups are out there trying to revive a Canadian national identity, and I'm like, okay, good. If you can scale, that's fantastic, but it's still early days. And I'm not entirely sure the people who are doing it understand exactly how to do that. Not the scaling, but also the projecting out that you need to do of this Canadian identity and have people buy into it. Because it's one thing to attempt to sell it, it's another thing to get people to buy into anything. And on top of that, right, you now have a revitalization of separation of not just from Alberta, but Quebec. You're hearing rumblings of it growing as well. And, as I've started recording this, I was reading a little bit about the Minister of Justice trying to intervene in a case in the Supreme Court of Canada about Quebec invoking the notwithstanding clause, and they want to rein that shit in. Now, my opinion of the notwithstanding clause has not changed. I think it is horrible beyond all measure and is a not so subtle backdoor into straight up authoritarianism, because it allows any elected politician to the rank of premier or prime minister, or you could be unelected as well, you can get appointed to that job too, the ability to overrule the House and Senate, House and or Senate. Now, I can understand in a system like America that isn't a parliamentary system, where the premier or, say, prime minister is directly elected by the people, you could have a system in which, in the case of the House and or Senate failing the people by, being a bunch of shitbags, like they have been recently, you could overrule them on behalf of the people. I could get behind that. You'd still have to have limits on it, which the notwithstanding clause has very little limitations on it. But all this is doing is just driving a wedge, because Premier Smith, who is also in the midst of using it for, oh god, what is it? It's specifically against, I think, the trans surgery stuff that's going on. I think that's what she's using it for. Forgive me if I'm wrong there. It's something along those lines. It seems to be a very weak way of using it, but she is invoking it, and Quebec is very much in favor of using it to overrule stuff. Hell, here in Ontario, we've used it a few times. It's not that great of a thing, but the manner in which it's doing it is begging for a constitutional crisis, and like a long, drawn out knockout fight of a constitutional crisis, which it should absolutely be, because this is not the way in which you would amend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You do not go to the Supreme Court of Canada and say, yeah, hey, this law, or the charter that we passed, well, we don't like it at this moment, so put some guidelines and rules and regulations. This is basically what the minister is asking for, or has said he's asking for. He's not asking for an overturning of it. Now, again, in the context of the notwithstanding clause, I think it needs to have guidelines and standards of how you can and cannot invoke it if it's going to remain. The problem, again, is you don't do that through the courts. This is not something you adjudicate. This is something you legislate. And not only do you legislate it, you have to have the sign-off of the premiers. So you have to have the provinces sign off on it as well, because it is more or less the Constitution of Canada. So, in the context of it's a nation divided, there's no real unity group, and now you have a constitutional crisis brewing in which, at the very least, Alberta and Quebec are going to fight over the notwithstanding clause having no guidelines, no standards, and whatever the Supreme Court of Canada decides, I would suspect they would likely openly defy it, especially the Quebecers. Like, this is how you piss off and get a complete revival of Quebec separation. Now, there's a possibility, again, I'm not so much in favor of this possibility, but I don't understand why you would do this unless it's preempting your doing something very bad. So the reason the Carney government might be doing this instead of, hey, they're trying to break up Canada, is they're about to sign off on some very, very bad things, and they want to prevent the notwithstanding clause being invoked against them. And they don't trust the premiers, or they don't have enough leverage over the premiers for them to go along with it. Again, especially Quebec and Alberta at this time frame. Everybody else will probably bend over backwards to eventually agree on that. I don't really buy into the whole breakup of Canada and make it easy pickings for Donald Trump, because I don't think Trump, it's the way he works. The big ask, I don't think he wants to gain territory, because the problems escalate that he has to deal with. Like, he needs the House and the Senate to sign off on that. He does not have either of those. He does not have control of either. If you don't believe me, go ask a MAGA Republican who's in the know. All right? Or just not even a MAGA Republican, a MAGA voter. How many congressmen or senators are pure MAGA that you trust without any thought of, hey, they may betray the agenda I voted on? But anyways, you're having this very much a constitutional fight in brewing, like a legitimate constitutional fight brewing over the notwithstanding clause, because, again, it's a very important clause. The idea behind it, again, I'm on board with, of having someone who is directly elected have the power to overrule bad faith acting legislatures to enact the will of the people. I'm okay with that. The problem is that's not what the notwithstanding clause is. That's not what Section 1 is of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Canadians like to pretend so, but it's not. And if you look at who's bitching, and I do mean bitching, about the invocation of, specifically Alberta, using the notwithstanding clause in the trans context, it's the elbows up crowd, and they're like, oh, look, they're going to take away your rights. It's like, Canadians don't have rights because of Section 1 and Section 33, also known as the notwithstanding clause. You have rights with an asterisk, and then at the bottom of the page, the asterisk is there, and it reads, lol, not really, we can do whatever the hell we want, because of Section 1 and Section 33. They are so broad and absolute in power, the way they are read, the way they are stated. They can do whatever. So, like, the amount of power a premier has with Section 1 and Section 33 is damn near infinite. Like, you can overrule federal law with it real easily. If you were to run on a platform of defying the federal government, okay, and you won, Section 1 gives you the right to tell them to F off forever because of the way it's phrased. Because it's like, oh God. The exact words don't matter, but I should bring them up because it is a horribly worded way. Charter of Rights and freedoms. Version. Okay, I need every time I do this, I just want the freaking words. Okay, here. This is the text. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantee the rights and freedoms set out in subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law and can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So in other words, if I win on defying the Canadian federal government, that is demonstrable, and I win in an overwhelming vote. Say, I win 70+% of the House and more of the vote, popular vote, all right? So, that can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society because I have won an overwhelming election, that I have a mandate to tell the federal government to get fucked. And is subject to only such reasonable limits prescribed by law. Well, that doesn't really mean anything because then it can, by law, as can be demonstrably. Yeah. So if you win real hard and you can do whatever. And then you can use Section 33 to not only tell the federal government to get fucked, but that the province doesn't have to listen to their law because you basically nullify it. The entire setup of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not to guarantee rights and freedoms. It is to subjugate Canadians into giving them the false sense of security that you have rights and or freedoms. You don't. You have rights and freedoms that are subject to the whims of those in power. And to be fair, I really think we need to have the fight over the notwithstanding clause, not just for, say, national unity, but for the fact that we need to repeal and come together as a society. If Canada is to unify, we need to unify around actual rights and freedoms that will be guaranteed and not subject to the whims of anybody. So having this constitutional crisis, this constitutional fight in the courts is actually a step in the direction we should and need to go if we ever want to find unity. The problem is, I think it's going to get... Everybody's not going to look for the actual result that is best for Canadians. They're going to look for the result that is best for them from the context of the Minister of Justice. He's, again, my theory on this of why he's taking this case is, or adjoining this, is because something is coming down the pipeline from the feds that they're not entirely sure they will be able to get all of the premiers on board. And the premiers will say, well, we need the notwithstanding clause to have no standards and guidelines because we want the power. It's what it boils down to. They're all power-hungry, crazy nutters, especially Danielle Smith. I do not trust her whatsoever. It has nothing to do with what most people say about her. It has everything to do with the fact that her entire background screams professional managerial class, and she speaks with that coded language, and it makes me very much nervous because she, in all likelihood, her goal is to become prime minister, and the damage she could do because she's relatively smart in the political arena. She understands how to whip people properly. Like in the context of the United States with the House Minority Whip, they're the person when it's in politics, when you're talking about whipping, it's usually about votes. It's garnering support, not, actual whipping. Different phraseology or different definition. Although, to the Democrats, their historical context of whipping for votes is basically the same. Anyways, that's the video for today. Till tomorrow, have a good day.